across and how people do. Psyche-Up is how you prepare yourself, how you plan, how you get yourself set. Procedure is how you organize the information. Personality, do you allow your personality to seep in? And practice, what do you do about practice? So we're going to take a look at each one of these. Now, we're going to do some interactive activities. Some of them are a little off the wall, and so you'll just be a good sport and roll with it, right? Right. Yes, everyone right. So it may require that you undo your video so that you can, so that I can see you and so that you can be part of this, but that's up to you entirely. So let's take a look at these 5 basic foundational elements of all presentations and see how they are today in today's world. All right, you are first. Let's take a look at you. The first thing is speaking space. As you know, in a live in-person presentation, which we used to do a year ago, you always checked out the speaking space in advance, and you know, are you using a podium? Are you at a conference table? Do you have a microphone? You know, all of those things. Where do you put the easels? Where do you stand in relation to the screen? Just basic speaking space, and we all did that. Has that changed? Well, of course it has, because we're all 1-inch squares. But speaking space has to do with what people are seeing. In the live world, you set up your front of the room and you make it look as great as you can, but you are not in control of what the people are looking at, because they can look anywhere. They can look directly at you, they can look at your slides, they can look at each other, they can look at the walls, they can look anywhere. So you're not in control. In the virtual world, you are 100% in control of what people see. And so your speaking space is reduced to the width of your camera. And my background, by the way, is in television, so I'm pretty sensitive to this. And so right now, what I'd like you to do is look at yourself on the screen and look at your speaking space. Remember, I told you we were going to do some interactive activities, and you agreed you would be good sports. So I'm calling you on it right now. Take a look. Look at what we see. Look at your own self and see what we see, and then change one thing right now. Take one thing and make it different. I took that piece of artwork down because Sandy told me to do that the last time we were together. All right, now look. Does it look any better? So the thing about speaking space is, just because you're home or in a different place doesn't mean that it has to look like that. And you know that every time you see people interviewed, you know, they always have a bookcase behind them. See my bookcase? I have a bookcase. Everyone always has a bookcase. I spend more time trying to read the spines of the books than I do looking at the person speaking. So basically, you don't want your background to be a distraction. And if your Zoom room happens to also be your bedroom, please do us a favor, make your bed and get some nice throw pillows. I had one session where I was coaching a man, but he was in his bedroom with his wife and they were both in bed. And it was like, they were dressed and everything, but it was like, come on guys, you know, make it a little more professional looking. So do something with your speaking space so that we're not distracted by your background. Oh, and there is Kate putting up her throw pillows. So, and you can see how fabulously better Kate looks because of her bed. So thank you for demonstrating that. Okay, the next thing is positioning. Take a look at yourself and where is your camera positioned? What are we seeing? In many cases, especially in news broadcasts, you're looking at people's neck. You know, you're seeing the ceiling of their kitchen. Adjust your camera right now so that when we can see you, we're seeing what you want us to see. As I mentioned before, you are in 100% control of what people see, which is totally different from the world of live presentations. So change the position of yourself or your camera so that you are looking your absolute best. For instance, you might be able to see that behind me there are these orange squares here. That's a pillow that I had to stick in my back so that I'm not leaning back too far because I looked better sitting more forward. You might look better sitting more forward too. However, you don't want to be in one of these things where your head fills the whole screen and there's no speaking space around you. So thank you for demonstrating that, Sandy. So the point is, maximize how you look and maximize your speaking space in a way that you would never have such control in a live presentation. We all know about nonverbals. Those are basically gestures and things that impact the credibility and the strength of your presentation, but have nothing to do with the actual content. The point I'd like to make here is that we always pay attention, especially when we're working with presentation teams, to when they point to things and the hand gestures and everything. Why people feel that they are sitting on their hands when they're doing it virtually, I don't know. Pull yourself back far enough so that your hands can show in the screen when you want them to. So right now, do that. Look at yourself and tell me that you're going to talk about two things today. Do this and do a hand gesture. Polite hand gestures, right? Either way, but the point is that you can still add hand motions to your presentation because they help to make you come alive and they help to cement the point that you're making. What's the difference, however, is that there's a time lag. As you can see, I'm putting my hand up, but you watch my hand come up and there's a time lag. So you have to slow down your hand motions, but remember to use them. Nonverbals are very important in terms of giving you a distinctive air as you present. All right, let's talk about clothing. My message here is, just because you're working from home doesn't mean you have to look like it. There is nothing that is more insulting to an audience than somebody who is giving a serious presentation about something and they dress like they're sitting on their patio. And while that's fine for meetings, it's fine for, you know, small group conversations, if you are the presenter, pay attention from the waist up, actually from the shoulder up. You don't even have to see below. No one needs to know that you're wearing yoga pants on the bottom. No one needs to know that you're wearing slippers. In fact, I feel badly for the shoe industry because nobody pays attention to shoes at all anymore. I hope they don't go out of business. I love shoes, but you wouldn't love the shoes I'm wearing today, but you don't know that, and so we're fine. The point is that when you are the presenter, there is every reason to look like a professional. And so for you today, I wore black. This is a fancy button here, and I have earrings. I mean, this is like, you know, this is what I would wear if I were seeing you in person. Nothing changes in terms of the impact of clothing, whether it is virtual or live. It's just you don't have to dress from the shoulders down. And it is perfectly fine to feel like you're dressing up a little bit. We all know you've got the clothes because they're sitting in your closet. So why not trot them out and let them get some airing, let them get some use. It's very important for credibility, for professionalism, and for making the audience feel like you care about them. That's really what's important. The audience needs to know that the presenter feels that the attendance of the people in the Zoom meeting or the what is this called? Ring Central meeting, is of value. And so you want to focus on that. So this is presence. This is about you. And let's take a look now at the Psyche-Up. So the Psyche-Up is how you plan, how you think ahead. And the basic thing about the Psyche-Up is to know your audience. Has anything changed since live presentations have become virtual? Absolutely not. You still need to know your audience. You still need to know who's out there, and all the things that you needed to know for a live presentation stay exactly the same in the virtual presentation. So you have to do your homework. You guys all know how to do this. This is your business. And remember that it is almost more important to know your audience now than it was for a live presentation, because it feels more intimate. Everybody sees you up close and personal. And you know what? You see everybody else up close and personal, if in fact they have their cameras on. And you want to put into play all the things that you've always done about knowing your audience. In particular, what turns them on and what turns them off. This may have changed a little bit, because does it turn them off, for instance, or does it turn you off, for instance, if people just have their names up there and they're muted and the video is off? Now, I know many firms have a policy for meetings and large presentations that the video is off when the speaker is speaking, so that you can go about your business and leave the room, or you know, drink your coffee or whatever, and nobody sees. That's probably fine. However, as the presenter, you can decide what you want people to do, and you can tell them, please leave your video on. You know, please turn your video off. Tell them what you want them to do, depending on what will get you closer to the impact that you want to have. So, what turns them on? What turns them off? Just think about it. Decide, you know, what you think is the makeup of that audience. You know this. Rule number one, always align your content with the audience, the client, the decision maker, the community. Align your content. That is the basic. You know this. You live by this. Here is what you want to think about, and that is, why is each person sitting in my session? In a live presentation, each person is sitting there probably because they have to, or it's part of their job, or they need the information, or you know, whatever. In this new virtual world, you don't really know why people are there, and they're not going to tell you, and you can't read the crowd. It's very hard to read the crowd in a virtual situation. So why is each person in the room? Maybe they're there because they have nothing else to do in this time block, and they couldn't care less about you or your subject matter, and but they're just there. How many things have you logged on to because you just want to see what it's like, and you log on for 5 minutes. If the person grabs you, you stay with it, and if they don't, you turn it off. I mean, it's too easy to lose an audience. It's too easy to lose each individual person if you don't have a dynamic presentation. So thinking about why each person is there helps you decide how you put together the presentation. All right, which brings us to procedure. So now here is the part of this discussion that I would like to ask you if you would unblock your video. Let your video out, because I want to do a show of hands like this, physical show of hands. So if you would be so kind as to let us see you, and you don't have to, but it would be really nice if you did. And here I'm seeing lots of not so happy faces, but there are faces out there. And all right, so what we're going to do, thank you for doing that. See, I told you to to put your camera on, and you did. See how audiences just knuckle right under? So, all right. So the first thing is, raise your hand if you think that a formal presentation for a virtual experience is a good idea. Raise your hand. Let's see. Formal presentation. What do you think? All right. Raise your hand if you think that an informal presentation is a better way to go in the virtual world. Raise your hand. So I'll tell you my opinion. It's my professional opinion, but it's still my opinion. And that is that informal is the way we are doing it because we are in an informal setting. However, there are certain topics that require formality, and you should not dilute the importance of your information by making it come across in an informal way because you are sitting at your dining room table, or because you see that everybody else is sitting in their kitchen. And so just keep that in mind. This is a decision that you make. Will it be formal or informal? All right. Raise your hand if you think that it is better to just let the information flow. Raise your hand if you think that it is better to structure your remarks. 2 hands up for Kate. So, okay, my opinion always is that structure is better. Why? Because you want people to retain the information, and if it's just flowing, it's harder for people to grasp the points that you're trying to make. So some kind of structure, any kind of structure, is important. It doesn't have to be the same kind of structure that you might have used for the regular presentations live that you would make, or a regular team presentation. You can be creative now, more creative, with the kind of structure that you want to put in place. And the point is that if you just let it flow, it will sound like that, and it will be more difficult for people to retain the points that you think are important. Raise your hand if you think that conversation is the best way to do a presentation virtually. Conversation. Raise your hand if you think that lecture is the best way to do a presentation. And I see that most people have no clue. So, what do you think? What do you think? So what I think, of course you want to know what I think, is that you choose what is going to work best for 2 things, your subject matter and for the particular audience. As you know, who's in the audience determines how you put together the presentation. And so if the people are there because they need solid information quickly, go with lecture. If you think that people just want to have a chance to have a forum for discussion and get ideas from other people, not just from you, the presenter, have it more conversational style. So last month, this, for those of you who were in the session last month, that was more conversational, and that was very appropriate for the topic and for the group and for the size of the group, and it was very comfortable, and I took pages of notes. It was very interesting. This, which is my preferred style, because this is just my preferred style, is lecture-y because I have certain points that I want to make sure come across, and lecture is the most efficient way in the shortest amount of time to get the information out. So it's a choice. All these things are a choice, whether it's formal or informal, whether it is flowing or structured, whether it's conversation or lecture, you choose. In a live presentation, you really didn't have the option of such freedom. You could do it sort of, but here where in the virtual world, you really can decide. All right, so now we're going to have some true-false questions. Ready? Okay, in this world, it is more important nowadays to break into small breakout groups for virtual presentations. All who say true, raise your hand. All who say false, raise your hands. I'm not seeing any hands. Okay, so what do you think? The breakout group function on these virtual platforms is really effective, especially when you have a large group. And you can start with the whole group and then go into breakout groups for conversation, because people really do like to talk. And whereas in a live presentation, you might not be so likely to have breakout groups, especially, of course, in a shortlist interview, but you might not be so likely to break into small groups and then have facilitate discussion. In virtual, it's a break. It's a really welcome relief from just sitting and listening to somebody else. All right, ready for the next one? In the virtual world, it is more important nowadays to adjust your pacing of your presentation. Raise your hand if you say true. Raise your hand if you say false. And the answer is, I think, true. Because why? Because no one wants to sit in front of a screen for any longer than they have to. Be succinct. Be to the point. Pace yourself so that you are maximizing your use of time in a way that was never quite as important as it is now. So the pacing has to do really with how much information you think people can absorb and what can you get in to an hour or an hour and a half if it's a long presentation. But truthfully, anything under an hour is welcomed because it's a long time to sit. People get tired of it. All right, the last true-false question is, nowadays, is it better to take questions during the presentation? All who say true. All who say false. And the answer is, write down your questions in the chat box and send them in, and somebody will read them to the presenter. When you have the conversational style or a let it flow style, then of course you can have questions in between. But basically, you want to have your questions all grouped at the end. First of all, if people are tired of sitting there, they can cut out for that part. But the second thing is that the moderator can group the questions so that you only get one question on a topic. Did you know that? Yes, you did. So why am I bringing it up? Just to remind you that these are choices and these are techniques. You don't have to just fall into it. And always, as you know, anticipate the questions in advance and be prepared. No question should stump you. All right, here we go. For some reason, people seem to have left their personalities at the office. And when it comes to these kinds of online presentations, there is a stiffness and an uncomfortableness that just isn't you. It just isn't. And I don't know why that is. I fall prey to it as well. So what we are all suffering from is what I've labeled, I've made up this name, Zoom choke. We're tired of it. And we've adjusted to it, but it does choke us. And we just want to be aware that it doesn't have to be the case. Let's talk about the most obvious example of Zoom choke, which is technical difficulties. This is the worst. No matter how much you think you've done this, there's always a technical difficulty. Well, surprise, technical difficulties have always been with us. Even in live presentations, the PowerPoint doesn't work, or the projector doesn't work, or the lights don't work, or the tech guy or the AV person doesn't show up on time, or the easels collapse, all kinds of technical stuff. So the fact that we have technical problems with these virtual platforms should not be a surprise and should not throw us off kilter. It does, however, because it's unnerving. You think, I can't do this. Yesterday, I was listening to an interviewer on NPR. She was interviewing somebody that she thought was extremely important, and she lost him in the middle of the interview. When they finally got him, first they had to take a break, and you know they don't have commercials, so that she had to make up some kind of break. But the other thing was that after she got him back, she spent an inordinate amount of time apologizing to him and to the audience and the technical. It's like, get over it. You know, technical things happen. Say your apology and move on. But for some reason, it unnerves us when this platform doesn't work. And I just am mentioning this to remind you that these nerve-wracking technical snafus, I'm trying to phrase it very carefully, have always happened in presentations, and it's nothing new here. It's just a little different. I think because we're alone and we can't just, you know, call somebody to come in and fix it. That's what's mostly unnerving. But the other thing about Zoom choke is that people are tired of it. And so what does that say to you about your personality in a presentation? Bring your personality with you. Allow some energy and enthusiasm and a sense that you love being there, so that the people will see you and also feel enthusiastic. Enthusiasm, as you know, is contagious, and anytime you can set the tone by making people feel that their time with you is time well spent, this alleviates, I can't say eliminates, alleviates Zoom choke. So let's just keep in mind the importance of having the real you be there for the audience. And as an audience, by the way, the audience has responsibility. If you were sitting in a room listening to a presenter, you would laugh, you would nod your head, you would clap, you would do all these things that give feedback to the presenter. You can't present in a vacuum, as you know, and you also are not an audience in a vacuum. You feel like you are, but the fact is you are not. And so have some kind of personableness between yourself and the presenter. Now, one technique for this is voice. What kind of voice do you use? Now, you can hear that I have this voice. I have this voice this is my presentation voice, and I bring it to the virtual presentations, even though that's not so typical. And I'm reminding you that it's a tool that you have, and it's probably the best tool that you have. So you're going to use your voice to guide your desired effect, and you're going to use your voice for intentional emphasis. Okay, so now we're going to do a little activity. Are you ready? On the next slide, there's going to be a sentence. And the job you have is to take that sentence and be very theatrical with it and add personality and make your voice a useful tool to engage people. So I'm going to put the slide up and stay on mute and practice it. And then I think Kate volunteered to call on random people to say your highly theatrical, filled with personality statement, so we can all hear the impact of voice. Okay? Now remember, you agreed to be good sports, so here you are. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay, practice it with your mute. All right, are you ready? Kate, ask some 3 or 4 people to unmute and let's hear their version, unless you want to volunteer. If you want to volunteer, raise your hand. No volunteers. Okay. Chickens, all of you. Okay. Kate, find somebody.
Marcy Stafura, are you willing? No. All right, Joel Pettigrew.
This design will mitigate the problem.
Oh, now give us more drama. Way more drama.
This design will mitigate the problem before I have my second cup of coffee.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. I believe you. When you say it that way, I believe you. Would you do it again? Because that was great.
This design will mitigate the problem.
Great. Thank you. All right, Kate, call on a few other people. Let's see.
I know Erin O'Keefe is going to be a good sport.
Hi, Kate. This design will mitigate the problem.
All right, do it again and give us a little more drama.
I want to yell. This design will mitigate the problem.
Great, thank you. Someone else?
How about Mr. Feldman?
This design will mitigate the problem.
More power. Give it more power.
This design will mitigate the problem.
Yes. Okay, is there one last, thank you. Is there one last volunteer? Kate, pick someone.
I thought I saw someone raise their hand. I'm scanning like crazy. Ellie, oh gosh, Elisif? I said that wrong.
That's okay, it's Elisa. This design will mitigate the problem.
Okay, one more time. Drama, drama.
This design will mitigate the problem.
Great. Okay, this was very interesting to me. Thank you all. Wait, I gotta. This was very interesting to me because nobody punched the word this. This design will mitigate the problem. So you all chose to punch the word mitigate or problem, and that's just an observation. It's not good or bad, it's not anything. So it was just interesting to me. So thank you. The point here is voice is the thing that will give your presentation personality. So if you want to keep people awake, if you want to keep people from tuning out, dropping off, leaving the screen, you've got to bring your voice with you because that allows you to bring your personality with you. Now, what about rate? What is rate? Rate is how fast or slow you speak, and we all have a natural rate at which we speak. What happens in a virtual presentation is, can you use your natural rate of speech like you would in a live presentation? And the answer is no, because of the lag time and the time delay. You really do have to speak more slowly. And also, you know, people step on each other, so you have to pause more. So you're really accommodating yourself to the technology when you think about the rate at which you speak. All right, practice. Oh my goodness, practice. Do we practice? The question here is, how did you do it previously? So if you would like to unmute for a minute and we can have a little conversation and tell us how you have done practice in the live world. Anybody want to unmute and somebody better.
In front of a mirror.
someone want to unmute and talk to us about what you have done for practice in the live world?
I have previously practiced in front of a mirror, Joanne. I'll kick it off.
In front of a mirror? Oh my God, that's very brave. Okay, I would never practice in front of a mirror, but good for you. Okay, someone else, practice.
I use the dog as a sounding board, Joanne.
That's the best. Your dog believes you are boring.
The dog.
True. I have to just tell you this. I used to say that all the time in when I firms and do coaching, and I always say, you know, use your dog. And one time I was giving a presentation to a very high-powered firm that I think there's somebody actually here from that firm right now, and a dog walked in. I don't know why, but a dog walked in and sat down, and I was doing my thing with my voice and the hand motions and all that stuff. And the dog got up and walked out. And oh, I'm not going to give that advice anymore about doing it in front of a dog. So, but I do believe that your dog will leave if you're boring. So I immediately changed my tactic in the presentation. The dog didn't come back, but I'm showing you my clay feet here. All I can tell you is,
Well, Joanne, I have a question now. Was that a Zoom presentation you were talking about just now, or was that an in-person presentation?
in person. No, we're talking about things that you have done previously in the live presentation.
Oh, okay. Well, I can tell you I've done small groups where before we present to like the whole company, we'll present just to our team.
And that's your practice.
For practice, yes.
Rehearsal, basically.
Rehearsal, yes.
Okay, great. Anyone else?
Yeah.
All right. So then the question then becomes, is it necessary to practice now in this virtual world? Yes? Raise your hand if you think yes. All right, so if yes, what would it look like? What would it look like now? How would you practice now?
I'll offer it up.
You record yourself.
I'm sorry?
You can record yourself.
You can record yourself. Okay, something else?
In our firm, we've actually done run-throughs and timed and had somebody else. We're in the office 2 days a week. So we've actually sat in conference rooms. Everybody had their own laptop, own headphones, and spaced ourselves out and practiced the run-through that way. And still kept it, you know, we're socially distanced, but still kept it so that people could play off one another and be more engaging.
Great. Thank you. Something else? So the most important thing about practice now in the virtual world is you really do have to practice with the technology. You have to practice who's going to say what when. You don't want people stepping on each other. And you want to practice. Like we had a dry run on Friday, Kate and Sandy and I, so that we could figure out how to get this PowerPoint to work without any glitches. And so far, so good. You know, we'll see. We're not done yet. But the point is that you practice two things now. You practice the presentation itself, and you practice the technology. It's a separate practice. And so that's what it would look like. So here we have it. Here are the 5 foundational elements of all presentations. How you present yourself, how you plan and psych up, the procedure that you use, whether it's structured or conversational or free-flowing, and what you do about bringing your personality into a presentation, live or virtual, and practice. All these things are the same regardless of whether it's live or virtual. The point is that to avoid Zoom choke, to keep it lively, to keep it smooth, to keep it engaging for your audience, you take the extra step to think about how the impact will be when you are in complete control of what people are paying attention to the whole time. A great presentation will be great if you pay attention to the elements and you bring in your personality. It's going to be great whether it's live or Zoom. You just need to focus on what is the same rather than what's different. And that is the end. So here I am. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Joanne.
Good job.
Now, I haven't seen any questions show up in the chat, but if you have questions for Joanne, you can throw them up there and we'll read them out to the group. Joanne, I'm going to kick off the questioning because I have too many to, I have just so many questions for you. But my first question for you, though, is it's about people's attention spans and whether or not they are shorter in Zoom. I have this overwhelming urge lately to use as few words as possible to sort of front load and highlight the headline as much as I can, even more than I did in in-person presentation. And I wonder whether I'm selling people short with assuming that attention spans on a screen must be shorter.
Well, they're shorter because you can't move. You're sort of locked into a box. And if you stand up and walk away, or if you stretch, everybody sees it, you know, and you're sitting there, as opposed to in a live presentation, there's the human touch. There doesn't feel like there's human touch. My suggestion is to keep your presentation as short as you possibly can. Get the information out there, make it lively, but make it crisp so that you're not taxing people. It's not that your own presentation needs to be short, it's that people are seeing so many in a day. And everything is a presentation. Everything is sitting at a screen. And as the offices open up and you go back in more, that's fine. But as of right now, we're really tired of sitting in front of a screen so much. So keep it short.
We've had a number of questions already come in addition to mine, and thank you. That's good advice. One I want to ask is, what do you think about virtual backgrounds? That's from Mr. Feldman.
So I will simply tell you that whenever I try it, my background, my regular background is so busy that the virtual background conflicts with it and it phases me out, and it doesn't do me any favors. In order to have a good virtual background, you have to have almost the equivalent of a green screen. You have to have practically nothing behind you. I do find it amusing when people have palm trees and stuff. I think it's very effective when you watch the news and you see the background of whatever city that person's in, or somebody's put up a background. I think that really works, but in order to make it work well, so that you don't, I don't know what the correct term is, but you don't flicker in the screen, what's behind you needs to be very plain. So, so if you use one, make it something that makes the point that you want to make. And then practice with it and see how effective it is. It should enhance your message rather than distract from it. If you're talking about the importance of, I'll just make up something, if you're talking about the importance of a bridge collapse and the need to redesign it, and you have a picture of palm trees and ocean, that's going to be a distraction. They're not going to listen to you. They're going to say, oh, I wish I were in Florida. So that's what I think. Make it appropriate, but check your background.
So many good questions. Gosh, I hope we can get to them all. Let me see. How do you make things conversational? It is hard to get people to talk. I have used polls in working groups. This is from Peter Kleiner.
So there are a lot of techniques, mentioning polls, there are a lot of techniques technological techniques that people are using, and such as polling and whatever. One of the reasons that I asked people to raise their hand this way rather than do the hand raise button that you push was to make it feel more human and give it a human touch. So I think the essence of conversationality is to ask questions and set the stage for people to feel like they want to talk. That's why the breakout rooms become important, because people may not want to talk. What do we have, about 30 people here? No one's going to want to talk with 30 people, but they would talk with 3. So the breakout room function is a tool that allows people to feel like they are interacting and having a conversation. Conversationality in the presentation itself is an atmosphere that the presenter creates by the way they use their own voice to encourage people to talk. If you talk like this and you're just giving your information, and now we're going to turn to page 2, and everybody should take a look at who wants to have a conversation with someone who sounds like that? So you set the tone as the presenter about whether you want to encourage people, and then in terms of pacing, you have to wait. So you ask a question. How do you feel about practicing standing up? And then you have to wait. And you have to wait. People have to unmute. They have to unshy. And the lag time affects the conversationality.
Joanne, in the spirit of conversationality, I'm going to stop reading your questions out to Joanne and just call on people to read their own questions. But I think that Susan Elmore's is on a somewhat related topic to what we were just addressing. Susan, could you ask your question to Joanne, please?
Sure. Joanne, in live presentations, there's a vibe from the audience that the speaker gets back, and they can tell how their words have landed, whether it's sort of humorous or a knowing thing. There's the audio, like a knowing chuckle, and you can read faces. It's impossible to read faces on the little bitty screen when you have the grid of all the tiny things. And it sort of feels like the teacher in Ferris Bueller, where you're going on and on and on, and you have no idea how anything's landing, and you're like, anyone, and there's no feedback. So how do you address that?
You have just touched on one of my pet peeves, so thank you for asking that question. The first thing is to force people to have their video on. You can't do anything if people just have their names up there. Now, sometimes, I already mentioned earlier, sometimes some firms require that you not have your video on, especially for certain meetings. But if you're looking for audience connection, you have to have the video on. That's the first thing. The second thing is that there really isn't a way to get that audience feedback, which is why, as the presenter, you must be more animated so that you encourage people to respond. So if I sit here like this and I have no voice and no affect on my face and I'm just talking to you, you're going to sit there just like that, being just the same as me. But if I have personality and if I have my voice and whatever, even if you don't feel like responding on the outside, subliminally, the message comes across that you want to be engaged with that presenter. It is exactly the same as in live presentations. You just can't see it as well. But it's the presenter's job to encourage people to be enthusiastic and to give a response. And in a live presentation too, if you are boring, the audience will be boring. And if you are lively, the audience will respond. The only difference is you can't see them. However, Susan, this does bring up a really important point, and it's exactly what you're doing now, which is the audience has to take responsibility for being alive. So nod your head and smile. And you were just doing that, and that made me feel enlivened as a presenter. So you can ask your audience to be lively. They will not. You can't do it that way. But if you are lively, they should be too. And when I'm working, right now I'm working actually with a law firm, and lawyers, you know, are very serious-minded and in their meetings. But when we talk about marketing and business development in the legal world, they can get enthusiastic, and I have to lead the way by nodding my head. And when I do that, I find that they will then nod their heads. So you want them to mirror you. And but the answer to your question is it's impossible to read. The direct answer is it's impossible to read.
I know we're running a little bit over time, so if you have to go, then we will miss you. But if it's okay with you, Joanne, we'll stay on the line and just take a few more questions for anybody who wants to stay.
Actually, Kate, I think we have until 9:30.
Oh,
So I think we're no panic.
organizer fail. Sorry, everybody. That was a false alarm.
I mean, obviously, if you have other work to do and meetings to get to,
don't say that. Don't say that. Moving on.
Okay. Okay.
No, I think that a related question to Susan's came from Amy Gusky, and it has to do with when you show your face and when you show a visual. Amy, do you wanna ask Joanne your question?
Yeah. Okay. So I know obviously like in any presentation, you don't want PowerPoints that just have bullets that you're reading and everything like that. But as far as visuals for doing Zoom presentations, what do you think is appropriate? When do you think it's better to kind of show your face, have sort of the team up on the grid and just be having a conversation versus having a PowerPoint?
This is where practice comes in. You need to practice all the different possible ways, because it varies with what kind of slides you have, what kind of presenters you have. And so it's really a game time decision. And in your rehearsal or in your individual practice, or when I'm coaching somebody, it really depends on how they come across and what's on the slide. And so you just, it's very individualized. It's personal. This is why you have to practice, because it varies with every context. So that doesn't help you, but that is what the answer is. Because most presenters are not comfortable presenting in the virtual format. And so that's why you have to rehearse. And when I'm coaching people, you know, I have to see how they come across before I can give them advice. And that's really basically what I'm telling you. You have to see how it looks, and then you adjust. Because you know what works and what doesn't work. You've done this a million times. So that's it. So practice in advance with the technology.
So do you suggest practicing first and then seeing if you think it would make sense for a visual to come in at that point, or right? Yeah,
yes. You know, design professionals, I'll say it this way, this is an obnoxious way to say it, but in the 38 years that I've been doing this, design professionals are really dependent on the slides and speak to the slides. And that is one thing if you're doing it in person, but when you're doing it virtually, you really are trying to allow the audience to see you. And so simultaneous slides and presenter is probably something you need to consider.
All right, we have a technical question from Sandy, which is right up a syntax alley. So go ahead, Sandy, and ask your question.
We've all probably watched a couple of YouTube videos by now on like setting up your space and getting rid of distracting backgrounds. One thing I don't know if we covered or not was lighting, and I've been kind of struggling with this. I have windows behind me, I have one here, but then I also put a little light, and I just turned that off, and I think you can already see my face looks gray because of the The lighting. So I don't know. That's one thing I found helped. It's just a tiny little light I had around the house. I didn't buy anything, but I've seen videos where they describe they're like a lights you can attach to your, you know, your monitor. I haven't gone that fancy. And the other thing was sound. Like I have these in-ear headphones off, and do you notice my voice is a lot more reverberant? Yeah, it's bad, right? Because of the echoing in the room, but I'll put these back in. So phones off.
That's
Is that like, it's better with my headphones on, right? Because it's going through the speaker. But did it sound really reverberant?
yes. It was
Like,
all
yeah. So just pay attention to that. Maybe do a test in your own space and see how you sound, and you might sound better with if you can get yourself some headphones that have the microphone thing.
that's great. And I don't know anything about the lighting, so thank you for the information about that.
I'm just learning too.
Let's see. We had a question from somebody who had to depart the group. I'd still like to ask the question, though. I'm sorry that that Matt had to leave before he answered it. I missed it up in the scroll. And his question was, where'd it go? In Zoom world, what is formal versus informal?
That's
He was looking for a distinction. Yeah, hopefully he'll see it in the recording. We'll have to send him an email and let him know we got to it.
So the answer is, I'm not quite sure because this is all still experimental. I think that a more formal presentation would be one where the person dresses formally, stands up, and presents based on slides. And I'm telling you that from one that I did coach about 10 days ago, where that's exactly what they did, and it felt very formal. It was completely not interactive, friendly, or conversational, but they won the job. What can I tell you? So, I think formal has to do not so much with what you say, but all of the what's the word? Ancillary things. You know, the clothing, the voice, the standing, the slides, and the informal, of course, is it can still be standing, but it's usually seated, more comfortable colors in your clothing, and more of a chatty, conversational tone of voice. It doesn't mean it's more interactive. It just means that it feels like it has more of a human touch.
Well, folks might have stopped typing their questions into the chat, but might be holding on to questions and looking for an opportunity to ask. Does anybody have a question they'd like to throw out for Joanne?
I do, kind of a follow-on for the standing thing. We've been doing a ton of Zoom interviews for jobs and stuff. And on our side, we'll often have 6 or more people as part of the presentation, both from our own firm as well as a couple of key sub-consultants. And, you know, there may be that many on the other side, and, you know, the grid starts to get sort of crowded. But I've often wished that our team could stand up and present. I feel, as Joanne said, there's more of a formality. There's more energy, I think. But there are a couple of things that I think make that challenging. The presenter has a harder time seeing the screen. It's hard to get the computer and the camera in the right place to see the screen while you're presenting. There is the tendency to move around. I mean, that's part of the benefit of standing, is that there's an animation and a movement. And yeah, there's like that sort of thing. And you're moving beyond the range of the screen. And everybody's different heights, everybody's setups are different. So I've decided not to advocate for that, even though I think it would help the feel of their presentation. Is there any way to get standing presentations to work when it's multiple people, or should we not try to do that right now?
Look at newscasts. Watch the news, and you will see that more and more news people are standing. The weather person, the sports guy, So, well, it's not always a guy. The sports person, the weather person, the breaking news person, they're standing. And how does that happen? Move the camera back. You see the whole person. Put the camera further away, and then you get as if somebody is sitting in an audience seeing the whole person head to toe. That's how you do it. But the comment about the team and all of that, you know, that's probably something that needs to change in the virtual presentation world. It's too many people. And the screen does get full. The basic message, as you know, is that when you are doing a shortlist interview, you're selling yourself. And anything that helps to sell the self is good. And anything that detracts from that is not good. So if you have too many presenters and the selection committee can't keep them straight, or it seems too choppy, then that's not doing you any favors, even if they have particular expertise that you want to be displayed. So that's the same in a live presentation, by the way. That's exactly the same advice. You don't need to bring everybody that you know. You only need to bring the people that are the best at getting the message out there.
Oh, sorry, Joanne.
No, I have a real attitude about that, because I feel that they have to bring every specialist, and you don't, especially when it's virtual, because it's what we discussed before. If the screens are too small and you have too many people and you can't see the facial reactions, you're losing an opportunity to connect.
I think we have time for at least one more question. Does anybody else have something they'd like to ask Joanne?
I do. This is perhaps a little bit of a different format issue, but one of the reasons I'm attending this is because I teach and I have students who are presenting their work to juries. And one of the things that's very difficult for them is that they develop their proposals, or their projects, in this case, a thesis, for example, which is master's level. It's kind of serious stuff. And they're presenting things with many, many slides, typically. Sometimes they'll inject videos. And then the jury will begin to question, and it becomes interactive. And the students really struggle with getting to the graphic image that the person's trying to remember. You know, that site plan question that, you know, the site plan with the red thing in it, and they start scrolling to try and get to the thing, and they lose the sequence of their conversation. And the poor folks are, you know, trying to answer a serious question at the same time they're managing their technology, and it's hard. And so I'm just asking sort of broadly, like what the only thing I've been able to think about is if they do have a slide rack, print it for themselves, to have an image so they can scan their own image and know to go to slide 15 because that's the one that's being asked for. But just asking actually the group, you know, if there are any thoughts on how they might manage that better.
My initial reaction is fewer slides. If you have fewer slides, it's not as hard to find the one that you're looking for. The other thing is, I don't know enough about the technology, but if you have a second set of just the slides that are more complicated, you know, people don't ask to see the slides that are simple. Again, they ask to see the ones that are complicated. So maybe pull those out and have those as an appendix at the end so that it's easier to get to those. But otherwise, I have no clue how to answer your question.
Well, Joanne, remember we were struggling with this PowerPoint speaker view when we did our dry run, and there is a way of having a separate screen open where you can see the speaker notes and you could sort of see the tiles or see the present, and then there's the presentation screen that everyone is seeing. I personally haven't had to deal with that on a Zoom call, so I don't know, maybe you have two windows open if you have like a separate monitor and then the monitor you're looking at, that's your laptop.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar. We've had numerous meetings in my office where we simultaneously are thumbing through 5 or 6 different documents, trying to, you know, cross-reference and communicate about them as a group, and then are also on Zoom with each other or Teams meeting. And the way that we have done this best is by having everybody, setting everybody up the same from the beginning and saying you have one window open, that's the Zoom window, and right next to it you have another window open, which is the PDF or the set of PDFs we need to look at. And that way you can easily scroll through and refer to, you know, page 17 of the PDF and also be talking to each other. And there's no other way to do it because you have Zoom and their PDFs and fumbling, and it just gets too frustrating. But everybody needs to do it. You need to say everybody in the meeting open 2 windows and just start that way.
Oh, sorry, you're on mute, Richard.
Platform that you do that with, the multiple images.
Oh, the platform, PowerPoint? Where you mean where you have like the speaker view and then the presenter view? Yeah, that's PowerPoint. But Kate was mentioning a PDF. I guess one way, if you're using PDF, is just to email the PDF to everyone when you're setting up the meeting. And that way they could also open it separately. Like most people have 2 monitors now or screens. Some people have 3 or 4. My husband has 4 on his desk. I don't know how, I would go crazy.
Yeah, one becomes a reference window and the other becomes the presentation window,
and he's
whatever
like, well,
the platform is.
Yeah, well, that monitor is just for my email, and this is for this, and this is for this. And I was like, wow, okay, you're really organized. That would drive me nuts. But yeah, maybe that's another option if people have the ability to invest in more than one screen.
Great.
Yeah, but 2 windows should do the same thing with fewer devices.
Yes, or yeah, pushing things into one window. Yes. Cool. Great. Well, I think we're wrapping up. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Be sure to stay tuned for next month. I believe we're having one next month. We typically would skip November because ABX was in November, but now they're in December and we're all virtual anyway. So why don't we try to go ahead and do one? Maybe we do it the week before the Thanksgiving week because we're typically every 4th Wednesday. But we can talk about that if that works for people. And if not, we could just see everyone in December, and happy Halloween. And make sure to like sign up for our LinkedIn page. It's the BSA Marketing /PR Network on LinkedIn so that you can get our posts and notices and stuff.
And thank you to Joanne. Joanne, thank you so much for bringing your advice, your expertise. I think we've all been enriched. I appreciate you.
Thanks, Joanne. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Nice.
Thanks, everyone. See you soon. Kate, do you want to just stay on real quick?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Do you have like 2 minutes so we could talk? What are we doing one next month? I didn't even look at the calendar until I
Hang on just a second, Sandy. I want to give it another second and then I'll stop recording.
Oh, of course.
And
open my other window now. Okay.
Okay, I put the last, okay, hang on, stop recording.